toward the medical room instead of a private hotel suite. 20 minutes later, Evelyn quietly returned to the ballroom and noticed Lily standing alone near the balcony, gripping her champagne glass so tightly that her knuckles had turned white. Their eyes met. Lily immediately looked away. Evelyn understood. Another trap had failed. Later that night, after returning home, Adrian wrapped his arms around Evelyn from behind as she stood on the terrace watching the city lights. "Can I ask you something?" he whispered. "Anything. Why do you trust me so completely?" Evelyn closed her eyes. The answer was so painful she almost couldn't speak. "Because once, I imagined a life where I didn't." Adrian gently rested his chin on her shoulder. "Then I'm grateful you chose differently." She turned around and held him tightly. Every time he smiled at her, every time he looked at her with gentle affection, she remembered the cold emptiness in his eyes on the day he signed the divorce papers in her previous life. Those memories kept reminding her never to take this happiness for granted. The weeks turned into months, and their marriage became the envy of everyone around them. Friends who once believed their relationship was merely political now admired the obvious affection between them. Adrian never attended business dinners without inviting Evelyn. She never made important decisions without discussing them with Adrian first. They laughed together, traveled together, and slowly built the kind of partnership both of them had secretly dreamed about. Yet deep inside Evelyn, fear never completely disappeared. She knew fate often demanded balance. Every time something wonderful happened, she wondered what tragedy might be waiting around the corner. Her uneasiness grew stronger when she remembered another event from her previous life that was now only a few weeks away, the accident that nearly took Adrian's life. In the original timeline, his driver had taken a mountain highway after an important business conference. A truck lost control during heavy rain, sending Adrian's car over a guardrail. He survived, but the injuries kept him hospitalized for months, allowing his enemies to seize control of the company, while Evelyn foolishly blamed him for neglecting her. This time, she would never let that happen. One evening, Adrian mentioned an upcoming conference at a luxury mountain resort. The moment he spoke the location, Evelyn's heartbeat stopped. She calmly placed her fork down and forced herself to smile, but inside every alarm was screaming. Adrian noticed her unusual silence. "Is something wrong?" Evelyn looked directly into his eyes and quietly said, "This time, I'm coming with you." Adrian smiled warmly, completely unaware that the decision his wife had just made might be the one that determined whether history repeated itself, or whether the future they had both been given a second chance to build could finally escape the shadow of the life that Evelyn had already lost once before. The conference began beneath clear blue skies at a luxurious mountain resort, surrounded by towering pine forests and breathtaking cliffs. Business leaders from around the country filled the grand hall, discussing billion-dollar partnerships while reporters waited outside, hoping to capture interviews with the most influential executives. Adrian spent the morning delivering a presentation that impressed everyone in attendance, while Evelyn quietly remained in the audience, watching not only her husband but every face in the room. She remembered too much to relax. Every smile, every handshake, every conversation carried the possibility of becoming another piece of the terrible future she had once lived through. Adrian's speech ended with thunderous applause. Several executives congratulated him, praising both his vision and integrity. As he stepped down from the stage, he instinctively searched for Evelyn in the crowd. The moment their eyes met, she smiled proudly and clapped harder than anyone else. Adrian walked over to her with a quiet laugh. "I think you're more excited than the shareholders." Evelyn gently adjusted his tie. "I'm proud of you." Those simple words made his heart unexpectedly warm. In all the years he had loved her, nothing had ever meant more than hearing her say she was proud of him. During lunch, the organizers announced that severe storms were expected that evening and advised everyone to leave before sunset if they planned to return to the city. Evelyn's entire body stiffened. The storm, It was happening exactly as before. She remembered every detail. In her previous life, Adrian insisted on returning immediately because he had an important board meeting the next morning. Halfway down the mountain road, the truck lost control. Everything happened in seconds. This time she refused to let history repeat itself. She quietly took Adrian's hand beneath the table. "Can we stay here tonight instead?" Adrian looked surprised. "I thought you'd want to go home." She forced a smile. "I've barely had any time with my husband lately. Consider it a short vacation." Adrian hesitated. The board meeting. Before he could finish, one of the directors approached and announced that because of the weather, the meeting had already been postponed until the following afternoon. Adrian smiled. "Looks like the decision was made for us." Evelyn silently thanked. Maybe this timeline really could change. As afternoon turned into evening, dark clouds gathered over the mountains. Heavy rain soon began pounding against the large windows of the resort. Guests relaxed beside fireplaces while musicians played soft piano melodies in the lounge. Adrian and Evelyn sat together on a balcony overlooking the mist-covered valley. He gently wrapped a blanket around her shoulders. "You've seemed nervous ever since we arrived," he said quietly. Evelyn looked out at the rain. "Have you ever felt like life gives people invisible warnings?" Adrian thought for a moment. "Sometimes." She lowered her voice. "Promise me something." He smiled. "Another promise?" She nodded. "No matter how important work becomes, never choose it over coming home safely." Adrian reached over and intertwined his fingers with hers. "I promise." At that exact moment, a loud crash echoed from the highway below. Both of them instinctively stood and looked toward the mountain road. Emergency sirens soon filled the air. Resort staff hurried toward the entrance after receiving news that a serious traffic accident had occurred several kilometers away. Evelyn's breathing stopped. She already knew what they would find. An overloaded truck had lost control in the storm and collided with several vehicles before crashing through a guardrail. In her previous life, Adrian's car had been one of them. Tonight, someone else had occupied that place on the road because Adrian had stayed at the resort with her instead. Her knees suddenly became weak. Adrian immediately caught her before she could fall. "Evelyn!" She looked at him with tears streaming down her face and hugged him as tightly as she possibly could. Adrian was completely confused. "I'm all right," she whispered against his chest. "I know." She wasn't crying because of the accident itself. She was crying because for the first time, she had undeniable proof that the future could be changed. Fate was no longer an unbreakable prison. The following morning news reports confirmed that the highway had been closed for several hours after the devastating collision. Adrian quietly read the article during breakfast before looking toward Evelyn. "If we had driven home yesterday." He didn't finish the sentence. Evelyn simply reached across the table and held his hand. Neither of them needed to say anything else. A few weeks later, Adrian's company announced its largest expansion project in history. Investors celebrated the record-breaking success, while media outlets praised Adrian as one of the country's most respected young entrepreneurs. At the celebration banquet, countless guests congratulated the couple. Many openly admired how much happier Adrian seemed after marriage. One elderly businessman laughed and said, "Behind every successful man is a remarkable woman." Adrian smiled and replied without hesitation, "In my case, she's standing beside me." Evelyn felt her face grow warm as everyone applauded. Across the ballroom, however, Lily watched silently. The admiration Adrian received had once been exactly what she wanted for herself. Every passing day made her resentment grow deeper. Later that evening, Lily secretly met with Victor inside a private lounge. Neither of them noticed one of the waiters accidentally leaving the service door slightly open. Victor lowered his voice. "Everything we've planned keeps failing." Lily crossed her arms. "She's different now. She never doubts him." Victor frowned. "Then we create something she can't ignore." Lily remained silent for several seconds before slowly asking, "What if the problem isn't Adrian?" Victor looked at her curiously. Lily's expression became cold. What if Evelyn is the one who has to disappear? At that exact moment, the waiter accidentally dropped a tray outside the door. Both conspirators immediately stopped talking and rushed outside. But the hallway was already empty. Neither of them realized that another guest had been walking past only moments earlier and had heard just enough to recognize their voices, though not enough to understand the full conversation. Meanwhile, Evelyn and Adrian had already returned home, completely unaware that the danger surrounding them was no longer limited to lies and misunderstandings. Someone had begun thinking about removing her entirely. Several days later, Evelyn received an anonymous envelope delivered to the house. Inside was a single photograph showing Adrian standing beside an elegant woman outside a hotel several years earlier. In the previous life, this exact picture had been one of the many fake pieces of evidence Lily used to convince her that Adrian had been unfaithful. This time, Evelyn smiled instead of becoming angry. She immediately recognized the woman. She was Adrian's university professor, who had attended an international business conference. The photograph had simply been cropped to remove the professor's husband standing beside them. Evelyn quietly walked into Adrian's office and handed him the envelope. Adrian looked at the photograph and sighed. "Someone wants us to fight." Evelyn nodded. "I know." Adrian carefully searched her face. "You're not upset?" She laughed softly before tearing the photograph into tiny pieces. "The only thing that upsets me is how little they understand our marriage." Adrian stood from his chair and gently cupped her face in both hands. "Thank you for believing me." Evelyn smiled through tears. "I don't believe you because you're my husband." Adrian looked confused. She continued softly. "You're my husband because you're the man I believe in." Adrian kissed her forehead, feeling more deeply loved than at any point in his life. Outside the office window, the city continued its endless rhythm, unaware that while love between two people had become stronger than ever, the shadows surrounding them were quietly growing darker. Somewhere nearby, those who had failed to separate them through deception had begun preparing something far more dangerous. And Evelyn could already feel that the second chance fate had given her was about to face its greatest test yet. One quiet Sunday morning, Evelyn and Adrian decided to leave their phones behind and spend the day together away from meetings, contracts, and endless responsibilities. They drove to the countryside where golden fields stretched toward the horizon and small lakes reflected the bright summer sky. For the first time in weeks, Evelyn allowed herself to relax. Watching Adrian laugh while feeding ducks beside the lake reminded her of the ordinary happiness she had once ignored. In her previous life, she had constantly chased luxury, status, and other people's approval, believing those things would make her happy. Only after losing Adrian had she realized that real happiness had always been hidden inside simple moments like these. Adrian noticed her staring at him with a gentle smile. "Why are you looking at me like that?" She laughed softly. "I'm trying to memorize everything." "Everything?" "The way you smile, the way you laugh, even the way you complain when the ducks steal all the food." Adrian chuckled. "I didn't know I was being studied." Evelyn slipped her hand into his. "You're my favorite person to study." Adrian looked at her with such warmth that, even after all these months, he still found it difficult to believe this incredible woman was the same person who had once kept him at arm's length during their engagement. As they walked along the lakeside path, Adrian suddenly stopped beneath a large oak tree. "Can I ask you something honestly?" Evelyn nodded. "Anything." He hesitated for a moment before quietly saying, "Sometimes I feel like you're afraid of losing me." Evelyn's smile slowly faded. She lowered her eyes and answered with complete honesty. "I am." Adrian gently lifted her chin. "I'm not going anywhere." She wanted desperately to believe those words, but memories of another lifetime still haunted her. Instead of explaining the impossible truth, she simply wrapped her arms around him and whispered, "Then stay with me for a very long time." Adrian kissed the top of her head. "For the rest of my life." Neither of them noticed a black vehicle parked several hundred meters away. Inside, Victor watched through binoculars while speaking quietly on the phone. They're alone. This is the perfect opportunity. A cold voice replied from the other end. Not yet. We need everything to look like an accident. Victor nodded before ending the call. His eyes remained fixed on Evelyn as the couple disappeared farther down the lakeside trail. He knew Adrian's company was becoming impossible to control while Evelyn stood beside him. She questioned every suspicious contract, exposed every dishonest deal, and encouraged Adrian to investigate every unusual transaction. As long as she remained alive, their plans would continue falling apart. Several days later, Adrian prepared for another overseas business trip. Unlike the previous timeline, Evelyn insisted on reviewing every detail of the travel arrangements herself. She checked the airline, the hotel reservations, the transportation company, and even the security team accompanying him. Adrian smiled while watching her organize everything with remarkable precision. You'd make an excellent security director. Evelyn smiled back, but inside she remembered exactly what had happened during this same business trip in her previous life. Someone had tampered with confidential company files and blamed Adrian for leaking trade secrets. Although he was eventually proven innocent, the scandal damaged his reputation for years. This time, Evelyn quietly copied every important document, encrypted company servers, and instructed the cybersecurity department to monitor unusual activity around the clock. 3 days into Adrian's trip, company technicians detected an attempted network intrusion from an outside source. Because of Evelyn's precautions, the hackers failed completely. Security experts traced the attack to a consulting firm secretly connected to one of Victor's business partners. Adrian called Evelyn immediately after receiving the report. You stopped another disaster. Evelyn smiled softly. No, we stopped it. Adrian laughed. Every time I think I've caught up with your instincts, you surprise me again. She looked out the office window at the evening skyline. I'm just making sure we have the future we deserve. Adrian returned home 2 days later carrying a small gift box. Another present? Evelyn teased. Adrian shrugged shyly. I saw it while walking through a market and thought of you. Inside the box was a beautiful music box carved from polished walnut. When Evelyn wound the key, a delicate melody began to play. The tune instantly froze her in place. It was the exact song playing inside the hospital corridor on the night her grandmother died in her previous life. Tears quietly rolled down her cheeks. Adrian immediately became worried. I'm sorry, do you not like it? Evelyn quickly hugged him. I love it. It just reminds me that life is precious. Adrian held her tightly, silently wondering how someone could carry so much hidden sadness while smiling every day. That night, Evelyn couldn't sleep. A strange uneasiness filled her heart. She quietly left the bedroom and walked downstairs, where the music box still sat on the living room table. As the soft melody echoed through the silent house, memories from her previous life returned one after another. She remembered signing the divorce papers with trembling hands. She remembered Adrian silently packing his suitcase. She remembered watching him walk away without turning back. Most painfully of all, she remembered reading the letter he had left behind after leaving the country forever. In that letter, he wrote that he had loved her from the very beginning, that he never blamed her for falling out of love, and that he only wished she would someday find happiness, even if it wasn't with him. She had cried until dawn after reading those words, realizing she had destroyed the heart of the only man who had ever truly loved her. Can't sleep? Adrian's gentle voice came from behind her. She quickly wiped away her tears. He walked over and sat beside her on the sofa. Another nightmare? Evelyn nodded slightly. Adrian took her hands into his. Whatever you're carrying inside, you don't have to carry it alone. She looked into his eyes, wanting more than anything to tell him the truth. She wanted to explain that she had already lost him once, that she had wasted an entire lifetime before being given another chance. But how could anyone believe such an impossible story? Instead, she whispered, If one day I told you I'd made terrible mistakes, would you still love me? Adrian answered without even thinking. I'd ask whether you've learned from them. She nodded slowly. I have. Adrian smiled gently. Then the past wouldn't matter. Evelyn buried her face against his shoulder and cried quietly. He believed she was talking about ordinary regrets. Neither of them realized that only a few streets away, Victor and Lily were meeting one final time before putting their most dangerous plan into motion. Victor placed several photographs across the table. They showed Evelyn's daily routine, the roads she traveled, the cafes she visited, and the charity center where she volunteered every Wednesday afternoon. Lily stared silently at the photographs before asking, "Are you sure this will work?" Victor nodded. "After tomorrow, no one will suspect a thing." Lily took a slow breath. For just a moment, uncertainty crossed her face. What if Adrian never forgives us? Victor's expression turned icy. He'll never know. The room fell silent. Outside, thunder rumbled across the night sky as heavy rain slowly began to fall, almost identical to the storm that had ended Evelyn's first life. Far away, inside the peaceful warmth of their home, Evelyn suddenly looked toward the window as an overwhelming sense of danger gripped her heart. She didn't know why, but every instinct inside her told her that the greatest battle of her second life was no longer approaching. It had already begun. The next Wednesday morning began like any other. Sunlight streamed through the windows as Evelyn prepared breakfast, while Adrian adjusted his tie before leaving for an important board meeting. The warmth of their ordinary routine made it almost impossible to believe danger was waiting just beyond the walls of their home. Adrian wrapped his arms around her from behind as she poured coffee into 2 cups. "You know," he said with a smile, "I've started looking forward to mornings more than business victories." Evelyn laughed softly. "Because of my coffee?" "Because you're here." She turned around and kissed him gently. "Come home early tonight." Adrian nodded. "I promise." Those words should have comforted her, yet the uneasy feeling in her heart refused to disappear. After Adrian left, Evelyn prepared for her weekly visit to the Children's Charity Center. In her previous life, she rarely participated in volunteer work, believing she was always too busy. During this second chance, she had devoted every Wednesday to helping children who had no families. Every smile she received reminded her that kindness was never wasted. As she drove toward the center, she noticed the same black SUV behind her at 2 different intersections. She glanced into the rearview mirror several times. Maybe it was coincidence. Maybe she was imagining things. But after everything she had experienced, she no longer ignored her instincts. Instead of driving directly to the charity center, she deliberately turned toward a crowded shopping district. The SUV followed. Her heartbeat quickened. She made another unexpected turn. Again, the vehicle remained behind her. There was no doubt anymore. Someone was following her. Evelyn calmly reached for her phone and called Adrian. He answered immediately. "Everything all right?" She kept her voice steady. "I think someone's following me." Adrian's expression changed instantly. "Where are you?" She quickly gave him her location. Adrian stood up so abruptly that the board meeting fell silent. "Stay in public areas. Don't stop anywhere isolated. I'm coming." Without another word, he rushed out of the conference room. Meanwhile, the black SUV continued keeping its distance. Evelyn pulled into the parking area of a busy shopping mall, filled with hundreds of people. She parked near the entrance and walked inside without showing any panic. Through the glass doors, she watched 2 men step out of the SUV and begin scanning the crowd. Their movements were calm but deliberate. They were looking for her. Evelyn immediately entered a nearby clothing store and quietly asked the manager to call security. Within minutes, mall security officers began searching the area. Realizing they had lost the opportunity, the 2 men calmly walked back to their vehicle and disappeared before police arrived. 15 minutes later, Adrian rushed into the mall, his face pale with fear. The moment he saw Evelyn sitting safely inside the security office, he crossed the room in seconds and pulled her tightly into his arms. He didn't care that dozens of people were watching. He simply held her as though letting go might cause her to disappear. "Are you hurt?" he asked repeatedly. Evelyn shook her head. "I'm all right." Adrian gently touched her face, checking for injuries with trembling hands. She had never seen him so frightened. One police officer explained that security cameras had captured the SUV's license plate, but it turned out to be stolen. Whoever had followed Evelyn had planned everything carefully. Adrian's eyes grew colder than she had ever seen. "From today onward," he said firmly, "you'll have professional security with you at all times." Evelyn wanted to protest, but stopped when she noticed genuine fear in his eyes. He wasn't trying to control her. He was terrified of losing her. That evening, Adrian quietly sat alone in his office after Evelyn had fallen asleep. His trusted assistant entered with a thick folder. "We've investigated everyone who recently had conflicts with the company." Adrian slowly opened the file. One name immediately stood out: Victor. Several suspicious financial transfers connected Victor to shell companies involved in fraud investigations overseas. Adrian frowned. "Keep digging." The assistant hesitated before adding, "There's something else. Someone has been paying private investigators to monitor Mrs. Carter's daily schedule." Adrian's hand slowly tightened around the documents. "Who?" "The payments were routed through multiple companies. We can't identify the final client yet." Adrian closed the folder. His voice remained calm, but the quiet anger behind it was unmistakable. "Find them." Over the next several days, security around Evelyn quietly increased. Bodyguards remained nearby without interfering with her daily life. Adrian also installed advanced surveillance systems around their home. Although Evelyn appreciated his concern, she couldn't shake the feeling that something even worse was coming. One evening, she visited her grandmother's grave once again. Standing before the headstone, she whispered softly, "I thought changing the past would make everything easier." A gentle breeze moved through the trees. Instead, it feels like fate keeps finding another path. As she prepared to leave, she noticed an elderly woman placing flowers on a nearby grave. The woman smiled kindly. "You visit someone you love?" Evelyn nodded. "She helped me become the person I should have been." The elderly woman looked thoughtfully toward the sky. "The people we truly love never leave us. Sometimes they simply give us another chance to become worthy of the love they already gave." Evelyn froze. Those words felt strangely familiar. Before she could ask another question, a phone call interrupted the moment. It was Adrian. "Where are you?" he asked. "At the cemetery." "Stay there. I'm coming." 20 minutes later, Adrian arrived, carrying a bouquet of white lilies. Without saying anything, he knelt beside Evelyn and carefully placed the flowers before her grandmother's grave. "Thank you," he whispered to the silent stone, "for teaching Evelyn how to love me. I'll spend the rest of my life making sure she's never alone again." Evelyn could no longer hold back her tears. She hugged him tightly as the evening sun slowly disappeared beyond the hills. Neither of them noticed a camera lens hidden among the distant trees. Someone quietly captured photographs of the couple before sending them to an unknown recipient with a short message. Target remains protected. Alternative plan required. Hundreds of kilometers away, inside a luxurious office overlooking the city, an unidentified man read the message before calmly burning the photographs. He never reacted emotionally. He simply looked out the window and said one sentence. "If we can't remove Evelyn, then we'll make Adrian choose between saving his company and saving his wife." The man smiled faintly. Everyone breaks eventually. Unaware of the new threat gathering in the shadows, Adrian drove Evelyn home beneath a sky filled with stars, believing that increasing security had solved the problem. But somewhere beyond their peaceful evening, a far more dangerous enemy had finally stepped onto the board. One who had been quietly watching them from the very beginning. The days that followed were unusually peaceful, and that frightened Evelyn more than open danger ever could. She had learned in both lives that silence often came before the storm. Adrian continued expanding the company while secretly strengthening security around both his business and their home. Although he never admitted it aloud, the incident at the shopping mall had changed him. Every time Evelyn left the house, he waited for her message confirming she had arrived safely. Every evening he came home earlier than before, determined not to waste a single moment with her. Evelyn noticed the change and loved him even more for it, but she also carried a growing sense of guilt. He was protecting her with everything he had, yet she still couldn't tell him the impossible truth about why all of this felt so familiar. One Friday afternoon, Adrian received an invitation to attend a private meeting with the chairman of an international investment consortium. The proposal was extraordinary. If the partnership succeeded, Adrian's company would become one of the largest corporations in the country within a few years. Every board member encouraged him to accept immediately. Only Evelyn remained silent. "What do you think?" Adrian asked during dinner. She looked at the elegant invitation lying on the table. Something about it felt wrong. In her previous life, she had never seen this invitation because it hadn't existed. That alone made her uneasy. Who arranged the meeting? The chairman personally requested it. Have you ever met him? No. She slowly shook her head. Then don't go alone. Adrian smiled. I wasn't planning to. She reached across the table and held his hand. Take your legal team, your security team. Verify everyone attending. He gently squeezed her fingers. I will. The meeting was scheduled for the following Monday inside one of the city's oldest luxury hotels. When Adrian arrived with his security staff, everything appeared perfectly normal. Executives welcomed him warmly. Lawyers exchanged business cards. Expensive wine was served while contracts were discussed. Then Adrian noticed something unusual. One man sitting near the far end of the conference table never spoke. Instead, he quietly watched Adrian throughout the meeting. The moment their eyes met, the man smiled slightly. Adrian felt an unexplained sense of danger. Halfway through the discussion, one of Adrian's security officers entered the room and whispered something into his ear. Adrian's expression changed instantly. He stood up. I'm sorry, gentlemen. I have to leave. The chairman looked surprised. Is something wrong? My wife. Without another explanation, Adrian hurried out. 10 minutes earlier, Evelyn had received an anonymous phone call. A calm male voice spoke only one sentence. If you want your husband alive, come alone. Then the line disconnected. Unlike before, Evelyn didn't panic. She immediately recognized the trick. Instead of driving anywhere, she forwarded the phone number to Adrian's security department and stayed inside the company headquarters, surrounded by dozens of employees. When Adrian burst into her office, he found her calmly drinking tea. He stared at her for several seconds before letting out a long breath of relief. You scared me. She stood and walked into his arms. I'm sorry. He held her tightly. No more apologies. She looked up. It was fake. I know. Our security team traced the call. It came from a disposable device. Evelyn nodded. They're trying to separate us. Adrian looked into her eyes. They're failing. Unknown to them, the failed phone call had been only a test. Inside an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the city, Victor stood before the mysterious man who had remained hidden until now. I told you they wouldn't fall for something so simple. The older man calmly poured himself a cup of tea. Good. Victor frowned. Good? It means we now understand how they think. Victor remained confused. The older man smiled. Real hunters don't chase frightened prey. They wait. They make the prey believe it has escaped, and only then they strike. Meanwhile, Adrian made a decision that shocked the board of directors. He canceled every unnecessary business trip. He transferred several important projects to trusted executives. He even moved part of his office into their home so he could spend more time with Evelyn. One evening, she found him working late inside the study. Stackers of contracts covered the desk. She quietly placed a cup of coffee beside him. You've barely slept. Adrian smiled tiredly. I'm trying to finish everything early so we can take a vacation. Evelyn laughed. You hate vacations. I used to. He closed the laptop. Now I'd rather spend a week with you than close another billion-dollar deal. She smiled through watery eyes. You've changed. He gently brushed a strand of hair away from her face. No, I've just finally found what matters most. A month later, they celebrated their first wedding anniversary. Instead of hosting a luxurious banquet, Adrian arranged a private dinner on the rooftop garden of their home. Thousands of candles surrounded the terrace. Soft violin music filled the evening air. As the city lights sparkled below, Adrian reached into his pocket and removed another small velvet box. Evelyn laughed. Another gift? He nodded. This one's different. Inside rested 2 simple platinum rings. She looked confused. We're already married. I know. He smiled. The first ring represented a promise made before we truly knew each other. He gently removed her wedding ring. I want these rings to represent something else. He slid the new ring onto her finger. A promise made after falling in love. Evelyn could no longer hold back her tears. Adrian took her hands. I don't know why life brought us together. I don't know why you've changed so much over the past year. I don't even know what sadness still hides inside your heart. But whatever happened before, whatever happens tomorrow, I'll face it with you. She broke down completely. For the first time since being reborn, she almost told him everything. She almost confessed the entire truth. Instead, she whispered, If I ever disappear. Adrian immediately interrupted. Don't! She looked up. I couldn't survive losing you. Those words struck her harder than anything else, because she knew exactly how true they were. At that very moment, hundreds of kilometers away, the mysterious man received another report. He slowly read it before smiling. So, they really would sacrifice everything for each other. He closed the file. Excellent. Phase 2 begins tomorrow. Outside his office stood dozens of heavily armed guards protecting one of the country's most powerful criminal organizations. On the desk beside him lay another document. This one wasn't about Adrian. It wasn't about Evelyn. Across the top, in bold black letters, were the words, Project Phoenix Asterisk. Beneath the title appeared an old photograph taken more than 25 years earlier. In the picture was a smiling little girl, holding the hand of a young boy. The little girl was unmistakably Evelyn. The little boy was Adrian. Neither of them remembered ever meeting as children, but someone else did. And the greatest secret connecting their lives had finally begun to surface.